Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. I'm excited to welcome back SFG Chief Brett Jones. Brett is not only well-versed in strength and conditioning best practices, but he also brings a unique perspective to the conversation with insights on effective writing methods, navigating the complexities of mental health, and enhancing memory. Join us as we explore the intersections of physical and mental well-being and uncovering strategies to optimize performance. This conversation has a little bit for everyone, whether you're an athlete looking to elevate your game, a writer seeking inspiration, or simply someone on a journey towards self-improvement. Brett delivers valuable tips of wisdom that you won't want to miss. For those that don't already know, Brett Jones is an athletic trainer who currently teaches functional movement systems and kettlebells as the Director of Education for Strong First. He is also really strong and a super cool and funny guy. Follow him on Instagram to check it out. As always, if you enjoy my podcast, please rate it on your platform of choice and share it with others. If you would like to support with a donation to help keep this podcast going and support the work I do, you can become a patron of the show by visiting my website or patreon.com/SifuMimiChan. Just a quick shout out to all of my current patrons out there. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. For comments or suggestions, reach out on social media at SifuMimiChan. Now on with the show. Hello, Brett. Nice to see you.
Great to be with you again, Mimi. Looking forward to chatting with you and your audience. And 2024.
2024. I was like, I need to make sure I get the Brett Jones podcast in. Otherwise, that little checkbox doesn't get checked. And you know how I am about that.
Absolutely. We need to make this happen from time to time.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, now, though, you are like a frequent podcaster and you've got your own show and things going on. So how's that life world treating you now that, I mean, you're always a guest, always like constantly on podcasts, but it's a different thing when you're kind of like having your own podcast you're responsible for, right?
Yeah. Mike Perry and I, started doing this minimum effective dose podcast here a while back. I think we're over 100 episodes in now. And I mean, honestly, it's just, Mike and I sit down and, get on a call and we're like, what do you want to talk about today? And some topic will come up and we'll riff on that for 45 minutes or so and then hop off. But people seem to enjoy it and just gives us the opportunity to cover some training and coaching related things that, we're getting some decent feedback on it. So it's going well.
Yes. It's good. It's good. It's, I mean, everybody wants to hear you all talk anyway, so might as well record the conversation.
Definitely. Mike's got a lot of great things to put out there and is a great coach. And I just try not to go too much Gran Torino, Clint Eastwood, and, tell the kids to get off my lawn too much as we're going through the podcast.
Well, feel free here because it's different podcasts. So
different podcast, different audience.
Different podcast, different audience. They don't know. They need to hear it. They need to hear it from you. But I found, and I couldn't believe this because I'm in year 7 of this. Wow. And I guess this is number 8 for us. And like, I know we didn't have you on in the first year or so. So, I mean, I'm guessing we're averaging about 1 a year at this point. But I was like, wow, year 7. And I think about it and people always ask like, well, why do you keep doing it? And, what do you get out of this? And I was just curious for you, like, what has been on a podcast so consistently? Because 100 episodes is a lot. That's awesome. Congrats. But has it taught you anything about yourself that you didn't or that kind of came up that you're like, oh, noted?
Not really. It's, 21, 22 years into traveling and teaching. And, one of the maybe not appreciated aspects of being a presenter is it's one thing to prepare your PowerPoint and to stand up in front of the crowd and know how to, manipulate your voice and use your hands and, put on the presentation in a way that grabs people and brings them in. It's your ability to answer the questions. that really separates you from a teaching standpoint. Not, from a presentation standpoint, if you're going to stand up and do a 15-minute TED Talk, not many people are throwing questions at you. So it is really reliant on your ability to present and speak and draw people in. But if you're going to be up in front of somebody, a crowd of people, 30, 40, 50, 100 plus people teaching, it's the questions that will come get you. And so, when Mike asks me a question at the beginning, before we start recording, and what are we going to cover for today, it's just kind of what sparked our interest for that time frame, or he had a situation with an athlete or a client or student, or I did on the other side of things, or just something that I'm interested or frustrated by at the moment. Like we did a pretty good Roadhouse review the other day when we recorded our last episode. So,
well, I'm looking forward to that. Being that I haven't seen the new one, but obviously, the old classic. It's there's a lot there. There's a lot there. I haven't seen it in a while. Does it hold up? I don't know. Have you rewatched the old one?
It is different. I don't need to rewatch the old one. It is implanted in the cortex. I can pull up the Roadhouse rules at any moment. But it's different enough to where it definitely holds up on its own. I have a couple of issues. I think they nailed the music. Actually,
that's always important.
Music is really good. Jake Gyllenhaal. I mean, not only is he a fantastic actor, but especially in this role, you just like him.
Okay.
Like he's just a likable guy.
Yeah.
And there's some good action, and I won't say anything more.
Right. Well, tune in to the podcast, if you want that full review, quick plug there for that.
Exactly.
And speaking of which, and this is where I failed completely. I was like, yeah, thank you so much for your book. I'm going to read that, and then we're going to podcast about it. And I think that was like a year ago, or like whenever you said it, because you were so kind too, because you were like, hey, you who know nothing, read this and tell me if it makes sense. And I was like, I'm a perfect test market, because, I'll be like, does this make sense? So I appreciated getting to, kind of have that preview. And then I was like, okay. And it was little parts, right? It wasn't the whole thing. But when you finally sent me the whole thing, I'm like, this is awesome. I'm going to just sit down and read this. It'll be great. And I've actually tried to do iron cardio here and there. And so I can say that I'm a bit of a test subject, on that. And having done a little bit of it, but congrats on, and of course, a great book with really awesome quotes, but we're finally getting around to chatting a bit about it. And being that I have attempted it, it's one of those start stop, because it's like, I'm going to do this, and then I hurt myself, or I get sick, or I, go follow a legislative bill, or something crazy in my life happens. and it always derails. The kettlebell is something I always come back to. Let's just put it that way.
It's always there waiting. They don't go anywhere unless moved. So they're consistent companions. I have them, as you can see, all over the place. Yes. But I appreciate that very much. And it's, September of 2022, I think, is when I really put the book out there.
Yeah.
And it's gone well as far as having it out there and having people, test out the protocol and getting their feedback. We have a pretty extensive thread on it on the Strong First forum, and I still do my little social media thing on Instagram and get a little bit of feedback there, and people are enjoying it. And I keep coming up with slight modifications or new twists on it, and so I'm still training that way. And in June of this year, I forget the exact date, it'll be 4 years that I've been training with the iron cardio protocol, and don't see myself switching to anything else unless something weird happens. So still keeping at it.
Yeah. And I have to say, being that it's really awesome, because the only part I've done is like the clean press, squat, right? I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, good. Those are three moves I know sort of how to do, right? And so it's like, it's not incorporating anything where you have to just kind of, oh, I got to get around to relearning this whole thing. But what I found really interesting, and because of my martial arts background, is there's so much, in martial arts with repetition, right? And then every time we do something in martial arts, every time you do it, it should be improving, or you should be learning something new about yourself, or you should be going deeper into that movement. So I know that there is a method and thought process out there in fitness where you've got to switch it up. And, like you were talking earlier about being on stage and give them the jazz hands and do like, oh, this shiny new thing. And in martial arts, especially, like now that I know some of these terms in fitness, like I was like, oh, you mean this? What like martial artists have been doing like for 1,000 years, like the squat or the pistol, which we do in Kung Fu. So it's just interesting because it's like there's a core there of movement, but I think the cool thing about it is, and one of the things I think when I've spoken to Oscar, about the training, it's like every rep you kind of learn from each one. And so regardless of the weight you've got, or if you're doing, because there's sometimes where I had like, oh, I'm tweaky, I'm just going to do body weight. Right. And so that concept of learning something from every single rep. And I found that really refreshing to have that kind of parallel with my martial arts training. And then because I am such a neophyte, when it comes to strength training, it was like, oh, there's something I can connect to there that kind of helped me as I've been doing that, when I do that program.
Yeah, I think martial artists and musicians in particular are two groups of people to whom you don't have to explain practice, right? It is sewn into the fabric of everything that you're going to do if you're a martial artist or a musician. Drilling the basics. You're how many years in as a martial artist? You're probably practicing some sort of front kick and some sort of straight punch. Like the most fundamental things. Musicians are going to be running the same scales, the same chords, because unless somebody creates new ways to make notes, we've got the notes we've got. And so you're practicing your chords. And I always come back to a famous cellist whose name always escapes me, who at the age of like 92 was asked, "Why are you still practicing?" And his response was along the lines of, "Because I think I'm starting to make progress. I'm still learning. 92 years old, probably been practicing the cello for arguably 70 plus years and still practicing and still feeling like there's progress to be made." If we bring that mindset into fitness, to our fundamental movements, man, how far could we take it? Fitness became entertainment at a certain point. People got misled in a variety of ways. And when you go back through the ancient systems and styles of training that were very influenced by military, the need to develop soldiers or self-defense, and there's a better way to approach fitness. And I learn something every time I pick up a kettlebell. I'm working on my right hand clean right now to make sure that it's landing in the exact spot for my press to enhance those two lifts. And so, I'm only 22 years into this, so I've still got a long way to go in my practice and lots of room to learn. So I love the mindset, and it does mesh.
Yeah, I love what you just said there because, 22 years in and everything. But at the same time, you and I, of course, like, we're not the same body that we were 22 years ago as well, right? So that first time you did your clean, I'm sure it's landing different or whatever the case may be. Well, you're stronger and wiser now, obviously. So I think people also kind of sometimes grasp onto this. I used to do it like this. I was always able to XYZ, we change physically and mentally, and circumstances change, of course. But so I feel like that mindset of like, well, it was always done like this before. Because you even just mentioned, oh yeah, since the book came out, I've already made a bunch of adjustments. I'm like, what, Brett Jones? You mean you put it in writing and now you're allowed to change things? How could that be? But it's funny because people get so caught up in the technicality of like, no, 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 you wrote it like this. Like, what do you mean now there's a variance? Do you find like when you train people and everything, like you have to kind of still beat that out of them? Or does this program, because of the nature of it, and you're like, no, you get these things and then it starts to correct? Or are you still like always having to, I mean, at your level, I know you're training like elite, like students and people who kind of usually know more than like me.
It's a mix. It's a mix.
Okay.
I've got brand new students who are just
Okay.
learning how to do the get up and
Well, aren't they lucky?
opening up their well, thank you. Opening up their mobility and going through that process of entering into their fitness journey. And so it's a line to walk, right? You once you know the rules, you can break the rules. And so it's hard to get people to understand that, we're gonna. I want you to nail down this kind of formatted thing, and then we want to hit the point of doing a little jazz, right? We want a little freestyle going on, and within reason. There's some things that even I can't get to, but I think that people struggle. Well, so you're doing this every 30 seconds. Well, no, it might end up looking like that, but there's not a timer going. I'm just doing my practice. And when I feel like I'm ready for the next set, I do the next set. And, I can just see people getting confused by, not having set work rest ratios. And well, how do you plan your training? I look at a blank piece of paper and go, what do I want to do today? And that's what I do. And so, newer students who don't have the guardrails and the guidelines set yet probably need to have a little more set program, which is provided. But if you've got a little experience under you, learning to do a little jazz scatting does everybody a little bit
Or
of
the
good, I
Brett
think.
Jones dance club moves.
Oh yeah, that nobody does.
I have to say, there are still instances where I always tell you this, but like, we'll be having breakfast or it'll be, the afternoon and I like hear you in my house. And then it's like, I'm just rewatching this FMS thing from Oscar's always got, Brett Jones kind of playing in the background somewhere.
Sorry.
But I always go, let me know when he's doing the dance moves and I'll come running over. And yes. Of course, your Instagram. Yes, I've always been amazed, even before the Instagram and all of that. Like, you always would put out your training logs, like, here's what I've done today. And you're just like throwing it out there for the world to see. And I am so not that bold to be able to share when people will be like, oh, so you sat down and stretched for 30 seconds. Is that was your workout today? So I'm cringe at the thought, but it's so cool to watch. And I have to tell you, because Oscar doesn't really have any social media on his phone, but he'll know when you're on because of your music, but also like sometimes there's breathing or whatever. And he's like, show me what's going on. And we're always like, Jones, overachiever. He's like, oh, I did it in 25 minutes. And then you'll see people say, like, oh, that took me at half the weight, like double the time and stuff. So it's super inspiring is where I'm going with this like long-winded thing.
Well, thank you. And it's been interesting because all I've tried to do, and it was kind of pre-cancer, pre-pandemic, that I started to kind of, I decided that I was going to move away from Facebook. I think Facebook is where to go to advertise some things. Twitter, now known as X, should probably be deleted, but that's where you go to argue. Threads hasn't figured out what it is yet.
Yeah.
But Instagram is just where you go to kind of be seen and put stuff out there. It tends to be a much more positive environment. And so I just started putting out initially as just some still photos, just some post-workout kind of things or pictures of my cat, just kind of doing goofy little things. And then, became a little more serious about it and putting just quick training videos up. I've done very little, if anything, that would be considered educational or coaching related. It's usually just, hey, this is what I did today, sort of things, and a little execution so people can see, what it looks like. And I actually got into somebody got in touch with me who's going through some treatment and having some struggles right now. And like, I look at, he's saying, I look at where you are and I just don't know that I'm going to be there. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm almost 4 years post treatment. May 15th will be 4 years post treatment. And, like I'm down the road a ways, like, and I can show you some pictures of just after treatment. And, when I started training again, and it, wasn't pretty. And it took a while to build my strength back. And I don't think I was fully, not even fully back a year later. So it was, in 2021 that I finally started to feel like, okay, I got my feet back underneath of me. I'm strength's back. I'm feeling pretty good. And now I'm even 3 years past that. And obviously I've made progress and have been able to build some strength and, keep the progress going. And nothing that I put out there is I hate aspirational marketing. I hate it with a white hot intensity. I don't want to participate in it. Nothing that I put out there is meant to be aspirational. It is truly just, this is what I'm doing, sort of thing. And I celebrate everybody's successes and strengths and progress. And, I think that's the place that we need to get to. And I'm surprised I have any followers based on the fact that I don't offer anything, via my Instagram page, except, hey, this is what I did for my workout today. But it seems to be going all right.
I think so. And you may not be putting out like, I don't want to be, or claim to be aspirational, but it's definitely inspirational. So I think that's always a positive thing too, right? Like people do need to see you just are kind of the lead by example type of leader, which is great because, like I said, you've always put your logs out there, whether before the social media stuff, like you've always done this. So it's not like, oh, I'm jumping on the thing and doing this new thing. Like you've actually always done that. And I always found that really incredible. And just one of the things that I'd always taken note of. I found that really fascinating.
Oddly enough, there is a very old appliedstrength.blogspot.com.
Okay.
And I think it goes back into 2005, 2004, 2005. I was looking back at some old powerlifting competitions I was doing in 2006, 2007, looking at my training logs and some of my, observations. And it is interesting to be able to go back and look, back into some of the beginnings of some of my kettlebell and barbell training and look at what I was doing at that time. And so it is neat to be able to go back and look and see that. And and then cringe a little.
But I guess that's a good thing, because if you weren't cringing, that means you are better now.
Right. Then if I thought I was figured everything out back then, what am I doing now?
Yeah, exactly. So I actually have a selfish question on the writing process, because I've been attempting to write a thing for some time now. And I know that your book in particular, okay, it's very like, there's a lot of technical things and there's a lot of training protocols, but there's still narrative in it, right? And there's still so much of your personality in it. And in terms of your method, or like when you sit down to write, do you get the writer's block, or do you just have a plan? What was your kind of getting started? Like I always find that, where do you begin? And then, what your process kind of looks like.
Well, for me, it's heavily based around quotes. Something's going to spark my interest, and then I'm going to find a quote to support it. So over the years, I'm 60 plus articles on the Strong First website, many before that on other websites. Now with the Iron Cardio book, Mind the Gap PDF that comes with the new video for that. I'm doing the Strong First newsletters and article announcements. And so like every week I have to have this moment at least of creativity to get something going. And one of the recent podcasts, I was looking on the Strong First forum and I saw somebody post something. I'm like, boom, that's what I'm going to write on. And then I went and found a John Wooden quote because it was related to coaching and being a student. So I went and found a John Wooden quote that would fit. And that's really, so in the book, when you see a quote, It's you. That was something that connected with that piece of the material for me,
Right.
and finding the quote gave me what I needed to get started on everything else. So I think even if you don't use the quote, it kind of suits my personality
Yes.
with movie quotes and things like
Yes.
that.
Well, we gel there.
So I think that it's knowing what you want to talk about, and then finding a quote that can kind of spark that. That's been my process for a long time, actually. Seems to have worked out okay so far.
Nice. Yeah, it totally makes sense, and it definitely matches your writing style.
Oh, and there's definitely writer's block, and there's definitely moments where you're looking at the blank screen, going, I'm I'm done. It's just not there today, and that's that happens. Sometimes a deadline will make that go away quicker than others, but there are times where the right answer is go do something else for a little bit and come back. And usually I'm a big believer in background processing in the brain, that even if if you don't have it in the forefront of what you're thinking about, your brain's chewing on it in some fashion. And moments of inspiration will come about when you don't expect it, or when you come back to something, your brain's actually been working on it. And so when you come back, it leaps forward to the forefront and really helps you move forward. So I'd say that's one of the things I've allowed myself in the last few years, or instead of grinding and just staying on task and really just I'm going to get this done.
Yeah.
There's times where push into that a little bit, and then back off, let the brain process this in the background, go do something else, come back, boom. The answer is right there.
Yeah. And that also, I would guess, also applies because I think Oscar was mentioning something about minding the gap and all of that, where also it allows whatever you're doing to really settle and sink in, even if you're not looking for a quote unquote answer or writer's block, but maybe even if you're working out or learning something, that process also applies, stepping away for a bit and then allowing things to kind of truly get absorbed, I guess, is
definitely. And from a learning and motor learning standpoint, they talk about interleaving the practice, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where we're going to go practice some swings for a little bit, and then we're going to do some get-ups, and then we're going to come back and do a little swing, and then we're going to go do some cleans, and then we're going to come back to get up, and then we're going to go do a swing. And so where traditionally, the way I was taught to learn, was rote practice, right? You're going to write it. You're going to write it again. You're going to write it again. You're going to repeat it. You're going to say it. You're going to say it again. You're going to repeat it. You're going to write it. You're going to repeat it. You're going to write it, and it'll get sketched into your brain. God, there's a better way to do it, and that's interleaving the practice. And so this, what happens though is when you don't interleave the practice, when you go with rote practice, and that would also be called block practice, where you're just practicing the same thing. For you, would be going in the martial arts studio and practicing some type of kick for an entire session, right? So by the end of that practice, you're going to feel like you made a lot of progress. It feels good within the session. There's a satisfaction at the end of the day where you're like, all right, yeah, got that nailed down. Well, you come back the next day and you don't got it nailed down. So it feels good in the session. It doesn't have as good a transfer to the next session. Interleaving the practice, where maybe you practice that kick a little bit and then you go do a punch, and then you go do something that's completely unrelated. Maybe it is a different stance or a different tactic that you're working on, and then come back to the kick and kind of rotate through those things. And if you do that in order, that's serial practice. If you do it in a random fashion, A, B, C, C, B, A, C, B, B, A, C, just kind of all over the place, that's random practice. At the end of that practice session, it doesn't feel as good in the session, but when you come back to the next session, the recall is there. Mm-hmm. And I see it all the time at our Strong First certifications when we get through, day 2 of an SFG 1, And everybody's at the end of the day, just they're looking a little punch drunk because, it's been thousands of repetitions. It's hours of practice. It's a very demanding course. And at the end of the day, most everybody's going, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow with testing. I'm like, take a breath, go home, eat, rest. Way more is plugged into your brain right now than you think there is. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, come back into that morning practice session and everything we've done over the past 2 days appears in their practice, typically. And I'm not going to say all the time,
right?
But we see some really tremendous change in 3 days. And so I think interleaving the practice, stepping away from things, just let your brain do its thing in the background. Powerful tools to learning, whether it's scholarly or physically.
Mm. And I know we just talked about this whole thing about, you're still learning about kettlebells, and you're dedicated for sure to be an expert and mastery of your strength training and all of those things. Are there new things that you like to try to learn that you were like, I've always wanted to, and so I picked this up in the last year or so? Do you have hobbies or new things that people maybe wouldn't guess Brett Jones likes to learn about?
Not much, really. Work is consuming. I'm a bit of a workaholic.
Really?
Work life, yeah, a little. Every day.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand work-life balance better, and try to find a way to do a little more for myself. But work has an enjoyment and a satisfaction for me that my wife will tell me, you need a hobby. Well, training's my hobby. Like, I really enjoy the 45 minutes to an hour that I might block out of a particular day.
Right.
Some days it's a half hour, whatever it is. I look forward to that. That is not only important for me mentally, because that is where I get out a lot of frustration. One of the aspects of our modern life is the lizard brain, and the fight or flight response is still happening throughout our day, throughout our life.
Yeah.
And we're not provided opportunities to release that on an ongoing basis. And training is one of our opportunities to get that out of the system. And so I think it functions for some really important things. So, training for me is a hobby. I do enjoy getting out and hiking, trying to read more, actually trying to go back and read this stack of books that I've got around the house that I've accumulated over the last couple of years that I just haven't been making progress on. Like, I finished one recently called The Spinning Magnet, which is all about the Earth's electromagnetic field. And it's really, the last part of the book isn't going to give you any warm fuzzies, but because it's all about what would happen if our electromagnetic field shrank, or because the poles do reverse. Mm-hmm. We have evidence of this in the geology and in the history of the planet, where the poles switch. And that causes a weakening and contraction of the electromagnetic field, which protects us from a bunch of nasty cosmic radiation and solar waves and everything like that. So the last part of the book's not going to make you feel very, very warm and fuzzy. But the bulk of the book is about this history of how we came to understand magnetism and then electricity, and then understood that it's electromagnetic fields, not one or the other. It's they're the same, so to speak. So interesting book. And that had been sitting on the bookshelf torturing me for a couple of years now. I can probably go back and find the Instagram post where I said, these are the 4 books I'm going to read. I finally got to it.
Hey, check.
Exactly.
Well, I would argue that that's definitely something that you're learning, because like through reading, you're learning, right? It's not that it needs to be like a consistent hobby. Like, now I am fluent in, a certain language or something. I mean, obviously that takes a lot of dedication, but I think you're not picking up just an entertaining piece of fiction. That sounds pretty dense there, or you're leisurely reading.
Well,
Are all of the books new or rereads that's in your large stack of?
They're new.
They're all new. Okay.
They're new. There are very few books, if any, that I have actually ever gone back and reread.
Really?
Now, I don't have a photographic memory or eidetic memory or whatever they call it nowadays. That's proof that I don't have it, because I think it's eidetic. I don't remember what it is.
Nor do
But
I.
usually by the time I make it through a book, I've got what I want or need from it. And I do have a pretty good memory. And if I find something interesting, I tend to hold on to a decent amount of the information. So I've got books like Timekeepers, which is not about watches. It's about how we, as a species, became obsessed with time, and how we've created this thing that we call time that regulates our lives. So that's a book that I'm getting into. I actually did pick up Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe, or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because I've actually quoted it and told people that the answer is 42 on many occasions, but hadn't actually read the book. So
Okay.
reading the book.
Yeah. Okay. So then it gives you a little connectivity. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So do you think that it's not photographic, right? But I actually was speaking to somebody about this, and there's a friend I have, and I'm always like, wow, you have an amazing memory. And I was like, is it that, or is it that when you're either reading something or if you have a conversation that you actually are just really paying attention, like your focus is very good? Because I feel like even when I'm reading, or now I'm only audiobook, which means I'm definitely doing something else while I'm listening, right? So the focus level, because I always say, oh, my reading retention's not great. But I think it's also because I'm not completely focused. So you think it's that you do have a good memory, or do you think that it's your ability to focus, maybe carry over some of your skills from all of that, your favorite hobby, of course, which is strength training, like just that carries over into whatever it is you're doing, like anytime it's connected to learning? Like, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a combo. I'm going to say something that I can't necessarily defend from a scientific standpoint, but I think memory is a choice to a certain degree. The amount of processing power that's in our cortex, and there's a fantastic book called On Intelligence, which is a little dated at this point, but it's a really good book on the neurology of the brain. And Jeff Hawkins, who created the Trio smartphone, which was one of the first smartphones, and has or had some think tank out in, I think it was California, where they were trying to do artificial intelligence. Concept of the book was, well, if we're going to say that we're creating artificial intelligence, we should probably be able to define intelligence first before we try to make it artificial. And it's a way more complicated conversation than you would think. And this neocortex and this, which is like 6 business cards stacked on top of each other, put into this wrinkly gelatinous mass that sits over top of our previous brain, and how information is processed through that brain. There is an argument to be made that everything we see does get its moment within the brain, and so if we can connect to it, there probably is a way to enhance memory. And what's the name of the book? The Moonwalking with Einstein, or something like that. It's a book on memory. And what happened was this author kind of became interested in these memory competitions. And these are things where there'll be competitions where they'll shuffle 3 decks of cards, 5 decks of cards, and they'll lay them out, and the contestants will get to look at them for X amount of time. And then it's whoever can recite the precise sequence of cards back to the greatest, it's like calculating pi, right? It's 3.14, blah, 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 blah,
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Ever how many cards that they can get through. But there's a lot of these strategies and techniques that are very learnable from a memory standpoint. And so in the end, this author goes from being Joe Blow author to winning memory competitions because he started practicing these things and these skills. And then he stops practicing the skills, and then he can't find his keys. Is kind of like the end of the book. It's like, here I was, memory champion, and now I haven't been practicing these things, and now I'm walking around my apartment trying to find my keys. So yeah, I do think memory to a certain extent is a choice. And I've always been the person that in high school, in particular, if I did well in a class or at least I passed one, I wasn't a great student in high school. A lot of stuff going on at home, a lot of distractions, my little pea brain, and just not a lot of care for what was happening in class. But if a teacher could make me laugh, I was probably going to remember what they were teaching. So that's always been a strong connection for me is having that little bit of humor that gets involved and that connecting very strongly for me. And that's really what it boils down to. And everybody's had this experience. You smell something, you're right back in a childhood memory, something that you haven't thought about in, for me, decades. And then all of a sudden you smell something and so this memory comes flooding back that you haven't thought about in 30, 40 years. It's in there, but what it's connected to is that smell. And so that's the other thing about memory. Memory, emotion, movement, and cognition are linked. They're not separate. We tend to think of there's a little piece of my brain that's just movement. There's a little piece of my brain that just does this. Right. It's so interconnected and interstored within the brain that there's things that you do from a movement perspective that are going to spark a memory. There's things that you're going to think that spark a movement. There's a smell that you're going to get that's going to make you cry because it connects to your great grandmother who passed away or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so all of these things are just kind of intermeshed. Sorry, that was kind of brain dump on memory.
No, I love it. And I mean, I've heard that. It's something allowed me to remember that, oh yeah, your olfactories, like that one's really connected to like one of the strongest ones. But was that book you're talking about, is that the one that has like memory palaces? Like that's how you learn to, okay. Obviously I didn't read the book. Oscar read the book. I'm totally not going to pretend to take credit for like knowing what that is, but he tried to take me through the exercise of the memory palaces. So that's how you can like help retain more information. And I'm like, okay. So yeah, that makes sense. And kind of going back to your childhood, and I often wonder about that. Like, is it the subject or is it the teacher? And obviously the answer is a little bit of both, right? Like if you tend to have an interest in science, then, but if you have a really bad teacher, I find that even that interest just really inhibits the learning process, right? So for you, obviously a little bit of humor was what made you pay attention to whatever that person was saying, regardless of the subject. Is that kind of correct? Like it was more about the teacher and what they brought to it?
Definitely. And so, I mean, a couple of examples. I had a math tutor for quite a while as a kid. Math was just not something that, I was okay with 2 + 2. But as soon as you put 2 + X equals, I was like,
letters do not belong in math.
Exactly. This is not a number. So algebra and geometry were really a struggle for me. And then in my senior year, I took this like trig and calculus course. Not a deep dive into either one of those. It was kind of a surface level of each. But the teacher, Mrs. Pack, who I still remember her name, which is my wife will tell you I am horrible with names. We've lived in the same house for 15, 16 years now. I can finally remember our neighbor's name 2 houses down. That only happened in the last couple of years. So it's bad. So here I am having basically gotten D's or C's and almost every other math that I had ever taken. I've got like A's and B's in this trig and calculus course, which I have no business getting because I don't have the background. Certainly couldn't bring the algebra and geometry to bear in trig and calc. All of a sudden, I'm getting A's and B's because the teacher was able to make it something that I was interested in learning.
Yeah. And is it conscious or subconscious that you yourself are then a teacher who brings humor to the classroom, to the learning setting?
Pardon me. Sorry, cough. You
No,
you
you're
made me
good.
laugh, and there we go. Um, I just believe that if you're not laughing, you're not learning. I think
Okay.
there's a much better way to access information. Are there times where you've just got to slog through what ATP hydrolysis is and understanding energy systems? Yes. But quickly get past that so that you can actually make it applicable and have a little fun with it. So yeah, if you're not laughing, you're not learning.
Yeah. It's funny because we tend to, I don't know if us as teachers in our Kung Fu class anyway, especially with the kids class, if we're trying to make ourselves laugh to keep us going or the kids, because I was like, Oscar, you're giving 80s references to a bunch of 10-year-olds and they have no idea what you're talking about. Like, do you find yourself like, in your head, you're like, hilarious, laugh track. And then you look around and you're like, these kids, this generation has no idea. They missed my joke. Or does it matter if they miss your joke, or do you not mind telling the joke because it makes you amused?
So
Like us.
it's reached a point where the fact that I'm telling jokes that nobody else gets is part of the joke.
Okay.
So everybody laughs anyway because they're like, yeah, we're not getting that one either, and I'm like, yeah, it's not for you. That reference was totally to make me laugh.
Right.
So
Okay.
yeah,
So we're not alone. We're not alone.
no, and I do think it's a big combo and how you start that. And the danger is, you have to set some expectations. And I think if you start off too harsh and then try to soften, there's a struggle there with the students. If you start off too light and then you try to get tough, there's another struggle that kicks in there. And so, you definitely want to set expectations and hold people accountable quick. It's kind of like the old business saying that you want to hire fast and fire slow. As soon as you let something slide the first time, expect it a second and a third and a fourth, and it's going to keep coming. So you can be fun and accessible, but yet you can hold people to a way that you want things done from a teaching standpoint. And striking humor has always been how I've kind of struck that balance. Versus we have instructors in our cadre that are definitely very martial arts based. And, they are the master standing in front of the room and they expect, that level of attention, respect. And I'm usually making fun of myself in some fashion. But then I can bark and command the room very quickly. And then I can also grab a fairly decent sized weight and demonstrate something that gets everybody in the room to go, oh, not just a funny guy.
I think it's actually one of the things that surprised me because I really didn't really pay attention to all of your videos in the whatever era that was. It was 2000. I don't know the year now. That when was the Orlando at
Oh gosh.
RKC? Like what? But right the year before that, I was like, I wasn't definitely not paying attention. So when I finally had met you a little more and really started to hear your, I was like, wow, he's so funny. I don't think that like seeing you and your kettlebell, was very intimidating. So I think that was one of the things that surprised me about you is how funny you were. I'm like, Brett's hilarious.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think that that's also just coming up alcoholic household, a lot of struggles, a lot of stuff going on. Humor becomes a way that you deal with a lot of that stuff, and movies were an escape, and being able to pull out a movie quote and get a laugh and things like that was always a useful tool.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
it makes complete sense. I mean, it's like a little safe haven that you can rely on.
Definitely. And I think that not to go too serious on anything, but I reposted a video that Mike Perry posted the other day, and it was a kind of a men's mental health sort of video. And guys tend to be stubborn and not willing to reach out and talk about things. And you see this video go on, and it's one guy, and the other guy appears very happy, and he's always cheering and trying to get the other guy involved. And the other guy's kind of like, meh. Well, at the end of the video, it's obvious the other guy's not going to show up, and it's the guy you thought was depressed the whole time is mourning his friend who appeared to be much happier.
Yeah.
And reach out, connect, talk to people, get counseling, whatever your thing is, do that, because it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I think there's
Said the funny guy.
No, I think there's something to be said for also, especially in the line of work that you do and that we do as well. Like, you really don't realize the impact you might have had with that one training session or that one moment where you were able to draw someone in and there was a connection and that ripple effect, right? Like, not to be too meta, like, oh, we're out here changing the world, but like, and as coaches, a lot of times, maybe it's the same for you as it is in martial arts. Like, you don't hear about it till like 20 years later when a kid comes back, they're like, hey, this was really helpful. It kept me out of trouble, or whatever the case may be. And it's nice to finally get that feedback. It would be nice to get a little earlier so that you're on the right track. But I think we maybe take for granted a little bit too, as in the position that we're in as leaders and as mentors and things, like how much of an impact you can make and how much of a difference a kind word or a acknowledgement. And of course, what you shared, and thank you for your candid sharing with growing up in a home where there was challenges that you took to teachers that gave you that escape and made you want to learn better. But those are the things that you grasp onto, right? And I'm sure if we dig deep into the Brett Jones mind, like, there's movies that really resonate with you because of something that may have happened that day or that week, and that just was able to kind of uplift you or take you, give you the escapism. I'm sure there's like specific things in your recall that's like, no, this helped me through something, right?
Right. It's probably why I'm such a Monty Python fan, because I was watching a lot of Search for the Holy Grail and Life of Brian and Meaning of Life and things, and Flying Circus through those years. So probably explains a little bit of my little more British style humor. But
that tracks.
to the idea of it's one of the only memes on the internet that I've ever seen that I think is actually worthy of being on the internet. Was, everybody's fighting a battle that you know nothing about. And I think if we kept that in mind a little bit more and were a little more kind, I heard somebody say, oh, I have no regrets. And I'm like, you're a sociopath. Like, how do you get to this point in life and or any point in life and not have at least a regret? And my regrets circle around, there are things that keep me up at night. There are things that drive me to be better on an ongoing basis, because it was a time where I failed to provide a kindness. It's a time where I failed to be aware enough to ask somebody if they were okay. It's those are the regrets that you carry. And I think if you're honest with yourself, you should feel those and you should carry those, and it should drive you to be better. We're all fallible. We're all going to make mistakes. We'll all get wrapped up in our own little world, and we get mad about something and we carry it into something else that we're doing for that day. But boy, I do this anytime I get coffee or anytime I'm checking out someplace or whatever it is. Eye contact and smile. Say thank you. I do that, and the response I get from the person is, that has not happened to them yet today, or perhaps in a long time.
Yeah.
And so just those moments where you can provide a kindness, those help.
100%. I could spend another hour talking to you, but I think as a seasoned podcaster, I know that we should wrap it up there because I think that's a lot for us to kind of think about. And thank you for sharing all of that. It will be very impacting for our listeners, I think.
Well, thank you. I mean, I didn't want to get too down the rabbit hole, but I think that we're at a stage where coming out of the pandemic and having been so isolated, and people are still out there struggling to get reintegrated and to have connection, and reach out.
100%. Thank you so much. And hopefully we will get 2 podcasts in this year.
Let's do it.
Really break records.
I'm up for it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank you,
you. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to The Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram or Facebook.